Welcome to Season 6 of the Hey Girl podcast with your host and my mom, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear stories from guests who are running their race in their place right where God has them. We hope that these stories will encourage and inspire you to do the same. If you want more information or to connect with my mom, go follow us on Instagram at HeyGirlGram, friend us on Facebook at HeyGirlPod, or even better, head to BethanyNeedham.com and sign up for our email list so that you can get all the Hey Girl tea. All right, it's time to grab a cup of coffee or your favorite seltzer. Here's my mom.
Hey girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. This week, I get to introduce you to a new friend, Brittany, who, can I just say, if I lived closer to her, I would probably force her to be my real life friend. Such an incredible conversation. I cannot wait for you to hear it. But real quick, this is your reminder. Girls, if you have been listening to all of our advertisements about Hey Girl Fitness launching and our group challenge, My Mountain Challenge, this is the time I want you to pause the episode, head on over to BethanyNeedham.com. You'll find all the links you need to go and sign up for this challenge. It's a 60-day challenge, and it's going to be an incredible time. And here's what I need you to do. I need you to put aside all of your preconceived ideas of climbing mountains, or if you're somebody that freaks you out, you're like, yeah, this is not for me. I want you to know this is more than just a physical mountain challenge, though for some of you that might be the mountain that you take on. But this is a challenge where as a community, we're going to face whatever mountain lies ahead of us, whether that be some emotional struggles we've been going through, maybe it's addictions we've been facing, just anything that's in front of us that has just felt overwhelming. And for 60 days, we're going to journey together one step at a time, encouraging one another, coming to God's word together, and working towards a goal so that 60 days from now, when we look up from these very intentional steps, that we see either we are at the summit or we are definitely much further up that mountain than we've ever been before. Ladies, I would love for you to join me. So head on over, sign up. I can't wait. I've been working on this for weeks and weeks, and I know for me, God has some big things in store because just like you, I've got my own mountains that I need to take on. And so I would love to do it with all of you. Okay, it's time. Guys, get your seltzer, your coffee, whatever it is, and just prepare for a gift of a story. And I can't wait for you to hear. Here it is. All right, ladies, we are here with my friend Brittany, who I have not gotten to chat with in a while. But Brittany, you are a returning guest to Hey Girl. So welcome back again.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be back and talk with you again.
I mean, if we invite you back, that means we really like you.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, you're basically part of the Hey Girl fam now, is what I'm trying to say. Whether you want to be or not, that's the problem. But
I would love to be.
So, Brittany, obviously, as I mentioned, you have been on the podcast before. So if you're listening and you're like, I don't remember Brittany, go back, check out her episode. I'll try and note in the show notes exactly what episode. Maybe I'll link it to make it super easy for people. But why don't we just take a minute? We're going to do a little rewind and fill y'all in a little bit on the beginning of that story. But again, all the details, you just got to go back and listen to the other episode. But just take a couple minutes, Brittany, and sort of give us that, what do they call it? The Reader's Digest version.
I will try my best to give that version of it. So my story starts all the way back, I think, in college when I met Sam, who was my husband now. And then at the time, we were just dating. And his sister and I played volleyball together. And then our roommates started dating. And so when our roommates started dating, I had always joked with my roommate, like, well, if you've ever gone on a double date. And somehow we managed to work that out. And we started dating my sophomore year of college, and then continued dating all throughout college. He was a year older than me, so he graduated a year early, and I didn't really have to convince very hard, but he ended up going to seminary in North Carolina, which is where I was from. We were at school in Pennsylvania at the time. And so he went to seminary down here, and then I graduated and moved down here and got a teaching job. And then about a year and a half later, we were married, the summer of 2013. And loving life, young, just enjoying each other. And fast forward to 2018, the Christmas of 2018. Sam woke up he was a very fit, very active guy. And he woke up Christmas morning and felt really dizzy. And being the caring, empathetic wife that I am, said, man, you're probably just dehydrated. Just drink some water. You're fine, kind of thing. And I didn't think twice about it. So he stood up and felt like he was going to pass out. And he just laid down for a little bit longer and then felt okay later. So all throughout January and February of 2019, he had these weird numbing sensations on his left side is the only way I can describe it, kind of like when your leg falls asleep. And it would come for a little bit and then go. And then the next day it would come again and go. And then it happened more throughout the day. And because it was happening more frequently, he said, I think I need to go to the doctor. And once again, thinking, okay, it's probably just stress. He had a physically demanding job at the time. And so I thought it just had something to do with that. So he went to the doctor who referred him to a neurologist. And he said, you probably just need to get an MRI. It's probably stress induced. Medication can help. Very basic. He was 28, 29 at the time. So didn't really think anything major. He went to the neurologist, got an MRI, and got a phone call that he had a tumor about the size of like an orange. And they weren't sure if it was cancerous or if it was benign. And so he had to get a biopsy done that March. And once again, we were still pretty hopeful that if it was cancer, it was something that could be removed with the tumor, not a big deal. You always hope that in those situations. And found out at the end of March that it was cancerous. And the kind of tumor that it was had roots in his brain. So it wasn't like they could just remove the tumor and then the cancer was going to be removed. Those tiny little roots were going to have radiation and chemo to attack that part, but they were going to try to remove as much of the tumor as they could. So that May 9th, he went in for surgery and they removed as much of the tumor as they could. It was about a 5-hour process. And towards the end, his left side wasn't responding to, I don't know, the different tests they do, but the surgeon would try to stimulate that part of his brain and his left side of his body wasn't moving. But the MRI didn't show a stroke or anything like that. But when he woke up, he had paralysis on his left side and could not move that side of his body. So for the next month, we stayed at Duke Hospital, and he did lots of PT, OT, and that was, for me, teaching, one of the busiest times of the year. And then we also had 2 children we were fostering at the time. So trying to be mom, trying to be wife, and trying to be teacher was a huge struggle, honestly. And he eventually was moved to rehab in Raleigh, which was closer to our home because we're in Holly Springs. So Duke Hospital is about 45 minutes from our house, whereas the Raleigh hospital that he was going to be at was about 30 minutes. So he was in rehab for about another month. And then once he got out of rehab, at the time he was learning how to walk again, how to get dressed again, doing all those basic functions that he couldn't do with that left side. But by the time he left, he could walk with assistance. He had a walker, but he was in a wheelchair most of the time. And then eventually he's a hard worker, and he was eventually able to walk again. He could pretty much do anything that he could before besides run, and his left side, he didn't have that dexterity with his hand. But it's amazing what you can do still without that one hand and what he can learn to do again, and different modifications that we just had in our house to help him with certain things like that. So that summer, 2019, he continued radiation and chemo. He did radiation for about a month. And so for that month of June and part of July, we were driving up to Duke almost every day. I think it was 3 to 4 times a week. And then he'd have PT and OT throughout the day that week as well, about 2 or 3 sessions each. So, it was a lot of driving in the car, lots of helping him and assisting him since he wasn't 100% independent yet. But slowly but surely, he gained a lot of that independence back. And the cancer, they were able to shrink it down to the size of like your pinky fingernail. And it stayed at bay for a good while. And then the summer of 21, we're eating dinner, and all of a sudden he just started to have a seizure. And he was aware the whole time. He never lost consciousness, but he, body-wise, had no control over his body. So, we had to call 911 and do all that. And looking at the MRI, it didn't really show anything different. It still showed about the same thing. But lots of things could have triggered the seizures, lack of sleep, eating, things like that. And so it was June in North Carolina. So we just attributed it to the heat, that he probably was over, not hydrated and things like that. It happened one other time that summer. He was out mowing the lawn and it started to happen again, where he had a seizure. And so we were just in communication with his doctor. They upped his seizure medicines. We thought everything was okay. And that August, his cancer started to grow a little bit. Mind you, it's so tiny at the time. So you think it's your brain, which is a big deal, but being the size of your pinky fingernail, I figured, we both figured, it's tiny, it's growing a little bit. It's not like it's, growing rapidly or anything like that. So, August that we found that out, that it had started to grow. So he went back on chemo, and November 7th, actually, he started having a really bad headache, started getting sick, and just did not feel good. So I rushed him to Duke Hospital, only because it was much easier to take him to Duke, because all the doctors communicate with each other. Everything's just easy when it's all in one place.
Right. I,
however, was pregnant at the time. And so COVID was still, is another wave that had kicked in. So sitting in the ER with him, I think I was like 6-7 months pregnant at the time, was just not an ideal situation. So I kind of had to drop him off and then come back, make sure my kids were all set, and then go back once he had a room. And once again, they just said, we see that the cancer is growing, so we're going to have to switch your treatment. And so that is the first time he started to take IV chemo. He had always had a pill that he took, and that was maintaining what we needed it to, but that wasn't working anymore. So they switched him to IV chemo, and he started to slowly lose a lot of his independence. And I didn't notice it at the time, because you're going day by day. You don't really see the drastic changes. So I just remember getting a text at school that he couldn't get up off the couch. Like he couldn't physically stand up. So I had to call a neighbor to go over and help him. He could walk once he got up. He was fine. He just couldn't get up. And I thought he's super weak from the chemo, and started rearranging for different family members and friends to come and sit with him for a few hours throughout the day while I was working, just so he could have some help or assistance, and just to check on him throughout the day. And then he got up in the middle of the night one time to go to the restroom and fell. And he didn't trip over everything. He couldn't tell me what happened. When I said, did your foot get caught on the rug? Did you hit the edge of the bedpost? He said, I don't know. I just fell. And once again, looking back, I know what that was. But at the time, I just thought he's just really not doing well in this chemo. And he got 2 rounds of it. And I remember Thanksgiving that year. So they started the chemo about mid-November. So Thanksgiving was about 10 days after that. And he couldn't walk without assistance. he was really out of it. He just seemed really tired. He seemed like not coherent all the time. He could have a conversation with you sometimes, but it was really exhausting for him to do that. And once again, I just attributed it all to the chemo. And so he continued chemo all throughout December, and he could only have it so many times. I think he got a total of 2 times, but continued to get the other treatments that he needed. And he, by mid-December, couldn't really do anything independently. I wasn't able to like take him places or things like that because I was pregnant at the time, so it's hard to help him, but he needed a lot of assistance and just couldn't do anything independently. We went to Ohio that New Year's to celebrate. We always take a trip with his side of the family somewhere at New Year's, and getting in and out of the airplane was a struggle. And I remember going through the TSA check line, and once the guy at the counter was looking at our tickets, he looked at me and said, "Is he okay?" And I said, "Yes, he's just on chemo." But it was very evident that he was not okay. And that was really hard because that was the first time I had really gone out in public with him. And so for someone else to notice, it just it stung a little bit. Not that it was his fault and not that he was rude for asking. He wanted to make sure everything was okay. It made it more aware about how bad he was doing at the time. And once again, all thought it was because of the chemo. And so then January 4th rolls around, and I knew what the doctors were going to say. I knew it was not going to be good. I knew that he was getting worse and worse, and it was getting harder and harder. I figured, just like you hear that you always have 6 months to a year. That's always like the number one thing that you hear in movies or like stories. They always have 6 months to a year, and then they get to do all these things on their bucket list that they wanted to do. So I thought we would have time. I just knew they were going to tell me the end is in sight at this point. So we went to the doctor, and normally when you go to the doctor, all his PAs come in first and let you ask questions and do different things like that. All 3 of them came in, the 2 PAs and the doctor, and my heart sunk because I knew what that meant. And so he started talking with us, and just talking about how we could continue chemo, but his quality of life is going to deteriorate real fast. So it was a decision of quality of life, or with the time that we had, making Sam feel the best that he could with the time that he had left, knowing that even if we did another round of chemo, the doctor said it's not going to do anything because the amount that he was getting was the full capacity, and the cancer still grew rapidly within a month. It had literally been from November 7th that it started to grow a little bit more. We started the chemo, and from November 7th to that he had his MRI the end of December, it had grown tremendously with the amount of chemo he was getting. And so knowing that a round of chemo might have maybe saved him a day, but he would have felt awful in the process. He was moved into hospice. I'm very thankful he was able to come home for that. We didn't have to stay at the hospital. And so we came home, and then it starts the whole hospice process where somebody comes in and they talk with you, and it is the most jarring feeling to be talking about, what do you want us to do if we need to resuscitate him? We need to order a hospital bed. Here's what you do when he passes, like all that stuff. It was like a out-of-body experience where you hear yourself talking, but you're like, this can't be me. This can't be me talking about him. So that was all very hard. It was just a very numbing time. I remember going throughout my days, but I don't remember like feeling a ton of, like I would be sleeping, but I wouldn't rest, or, I would really try to hide a lot of my true feelings from Sam because I didn't want his last few days to be me crying every time. So it was a lot of me helping him, still assisting him and doing all that. And then crying when he wasn't around, or crying when I went upstairs. My in-laws came, and they basically moved in with me for the month of January to help with the kids, which was really helpful because I needed to keep as much normalcy for them as possible because school's going on, and you never know what the right decision is, but I felt like the right decision was to keep them in consistency. And so they
Yeah.
still went to school while he was in hospice. And the hospice nurse had told us, here's some signs you'll know when it's ending. We live in a very family-oriented neighborhood. And one of my big concerns was that he was going to pass and they would have to take his body out, and it's going to be during the day and kids are outside playing and my children are going to see. And that was just a huge worry of mine was, Lord, when he passes, please let it be to where it's not like my kids are here or whatnot. And so the Lord was so gracious in that. And my sweet neighbors had hired a personal chef for us because at that time it was my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and then my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and my kids and Sam. And so the Saturday night, it was the 15th, they had hired a chef for us. That Friday night into Saturday morning, Sam had transitioned, which is what is a term that they use to say that he was basically in a coma at this point, and it was around 24 to 48 hours. And so my brother-in-law would stay with him at night to give me some rest. And so I came down that morning and he said he's not responding, kind of thing, still breathing, but just not responding. And so we knew that we had a day or 2 days. And so that night we had a personal chef. Sam was able to pick out the menu the Wednesday before. He wasn't able to eat it, unfortunately, but he was there with us. And it was about 9:30. The nurse had come. Sam was he was breathing weird and just struggling to breathe. And so I had called the hospice nurse and she came. She had been the night nurse for several days, so we'd gotten to know her really well.
Yeah.
And she was very, very sweet. And so she came and she said, he's in transition. It's probably going to be within the next 24 hours. She had pulled out of the driveway. And as soon as she pulled out of the driveway, Sam stopped breathing. And so we called her back and she came and she said, it's happening. And at 9:48, he passed away. But I had his parents, his sister and brother-in-law. My daughter, I gave her the option. She wanted to stay down with us. She was 13 at the time. I said, do you want to stay? Do you want to go up in the room? She said, I want to stay. Thankfully, my 8-year-old at the time had fallen asleep already upstairs. And so he got to say goodbye, but he wasn't there in the moment, which I was afraid that he would have been there in the moment. That would have been really hard for him. And he passed away at night. So the Lord was very gracious in that when they took his body out, it was close to midnight and no one in the neighborhood is up. No one had to see that. We didn't have to worry about, I didn't have to text the neighbors to, keep your kids inside for a little bit or anything. The Lord was really gracious in that. And I honestly could not have asked for anything better in his passing. It was peaceful. He had the people he loved around him. She had asked us to play some type of music for him, like pump up music, worship music. And so I said, well, I have a pump up song that he would love, and then I have a worship song that he would love. And so his go-to, he'd probably kill me if I told you guys this, but his go-to workout pump up song was Eminem, Lose Yourself. And so yes, is that yours?
Yes.
It is you just play that and it was a different person would come over him. And I was like, who is this guy? He knew the lyrics, all of it. So
Stop it.
We played that. We played that as he passed and then played a worship song after that together. But it was funny too, because that February was the Super Bowl that Eminem performed in, and he performed that song. And I was like, Sam would have loved this. So it was a hard moment, but I could not have asked for a better way to say goodbye to my husband. And, all throughout hospice, he would have moments of being on morphine and out of it. And then he'd have some Sam moments throughout where he would crack a joke or different things like that. And so it was really sweet time, but obviously a very hard time. So yeah, that was a recap / going into what I didn't cover in the episode. So I apologize. I went into both of it.
No, not at all. Yeah, the last time we talked, Sam was still with us, and I obviously knew going into this that what you just shared, that Sam's not with us any longer, which is, I mean, like, let's be real, it's in the best circumstances. That's a hard story. That's a hard, see, you got me all, we're just gonna cry through the whole thing. It's fine. But Brittany, I just think one of the things that is so beautiful about your story and who you are and the work that God's done, and when we spoke to you before, and even now, as I sit here, is I appreciate so much that you're very real about the pain of it, even as you're faithful, and like kind of that, God was so gracious even in the details of when Sam passed. But I cannot tell you how much it means to me to have women like you who walk hard things that are just raw and honest about, but it still is so hard. Like, it's just so hard. 'Cause I think that we tend, especially right now, I feel like we live on this pendulum of, we feel like it has to be all, glory to God. Everything is, I'm fine, you're fine, we're all fine. However,
yes,
or that God has forsaken me. This is the worst, and I do think that there's just this incredible depth and beauty when that joy and that suffering and everything that goes into these hard parts of our story, when we can be really real about all of it, that God is good and this sucks. Like,
yeah,
that God
absolutely.
is good. And I heard a song recently. You were making me think of it as you were sharing that. I'm going to butcher this, so I'm not even going to say who wrote it, because in case I butcher their song, but the words were basically, I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, but I know what you've done before. Like, this idea of God's faithfulness, even when I don't understand, like even when I don't get it in the moment. And girl, you've walked through what a lot of, like, we'll put this on the list of things that wives fear, moms fear, is losing your spouse. And you're not fully, obviously you're a little ways out of this right now. We just walked through a real hard thing, but I'm wondering for you, what has God's faithfulness looked like tangibly as you've had to walk from losing Sam? Because you mentioned something that, honestly, I wrote it down because I'm like, that is such a great idea for how to serve someone in this, is hiring someone as chef. Are you kidding me?
Yes.
I have never thought of this. Like, that's genius. What a tangible and like way to serve somebody. But how has God shown up? What does that faithfulness look like? And what does it look like for you to, it seems so trivial to say, run your race in your place right now, but this is your lane. Like, what has that looked like this last bit of your season?
So it's been about a year and 3 months since Sam's passed, because it was January 15th of 22. So I can breathe again, I'll say that. So in the past year, just looking at some of the ways I had heard, and I apologize, I'm like rubbing my nose and everything.
You and me both, girl.
I had heard someone give an example one time about, and I don't know if it's true that elephants do that, so you might need to fact check me, but I had heard that when an elephant is injured, the elephants all surround the one elephant while, like, one of them is nursing, or while, he's trying to come to feeling okay, that the elephants would surround him to keep out any attackers or anything like that. Once again, I don't know if that's true that elephants do that, but someone had given that example, and I was like, that's a really good example, because that's about how it felt the past year. Was, no one could bring Sam back, no one could take away that pain, but I had a community who surrounded me, who took the burden off of things for me that I didn't have to think about that could have been huge stressors and could have required a lot of energy, but they just did it for me. My neighbors continued to mow my lawns. And once again, didn't ask, they just did it. I don't have a huge lawn. And so I really wasn't like, and I'm not really concerned about my lawn. I probably should be more, but I'm not. I'm that neighbor. And so I would just look outside hearing the lawnmower and they'd be mowing it and they would go back and forth. I don't think they ever communicated with each other, but they just both would like, one would do it one weekend, the other one would do it next weekend. And I don't think it ever grew past like 3 inches. Like they were just on it. And I had other people. So when he went into hospice, lots of people are bringing things over, which was always so helpful. And some people brought like Costco sized things. So that way I could stay in a box and stay in my garage and we didn't have to use it right then. Like popcorn. I still have popcorn, I think, from one of those, but my family loves popcorn, so it's okay. And, other people brought like paper products, like paper towels, toilet paper, things like that. I learned quickly, in that time, something I was like, I'm going to commit to this when I hear someone is sick, is offering to take the trash, because we had so many things coming in. And in hospice, they give you boxes of stuff. So like everything you have to open a box. It's kind of like Amazon, where then you have all these boxes. Well, our recycling only comes once every other week. So between the trash can recycling, it would fill up like 2 days after it had been emptied. And we live probably 2 miles from a landfill site where, it's pretty easy to take it to, but none of us had the time or the energy to go do that.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of people offer like, hey, I'm taking a dump run. Is there anything you need to take? And I'd leave it on the porch. I think the biggest thing that was helpful for me was when people brought something, it didn't always require me to have contact with them. I think that was the hardest thing during that time is no one knows what to say to you. Like, what do you say in this situation? It's hard. There's nothing you can say that's going to take away the pain. Obviously it's always comforting to hear, like, I'm praying for you, things like that. But people I know, I could tell they just don't always know what to say. So a lot of times the gifts that people would give or things they would bring, they just leave it on my porch and text me, hey, I left this on your porch for you, that kind of thing. And it was once again so comforting because I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to like put on a face of like, oh, I'm doing okay. Or, this. It was just on my porch and left. And sometimes people wouldn't even text me. I still don't know who some of the gifts came from to this day. I don't know who some of these people who dropped off things were. And I just had to learn to let that go because I tried to figure it out. And my mom was like, just let people be a blessing. And so I just had to let it go and not worry about it. But I would say like, those were some big things. People offering, especially with my 8-year-old who is high energy. Saturdays were just really hard, Saturdays and Sundays, because it's out of routine, out of structure. And he's not just going to go with a stranger. He's not too keen on, going with strangers. And so it was people who already had a relationship with him, a couple of teachers at his school, a couple of people who they had kids his age, and they would just take him for a few hours on Saturday. And it was so helpful because especially transitioning to that single mom phase. Saturdays are my day to rest too. I went back to work in February and I was work and then I come home and sleep. At the time I was 8 months pregnant. And so it was just like, I needed a nap or a break or just to sit. And so having him being able to do something was helpful. Whereas my daughter needs more the one-on-one time. And it's not like she needed a play date because she was 13, but she just wanted to have people to talk to and things to do. So a couple of people would say, hey, can I pick her up and take her to coffee? And it was like, yes. And I think it's hard because sometimes people say, what can I do to help? And at that time, you're just so overwhelmed. You're like, I don't know. I know there's a million things. I just don't know what. And so I think when people were specific with, hey, I have 2 hours on Saturday. Can I take the kids or can I go grocery shopping for you if you give me a list? Being specific like that, because then I could say, oh, that would be really great. Or, oh, we're not going to be here Saturday or whatever.
Yeah.
When it was just specific like that and not being offended if I said no, I just had to really learn like what I need and what I don't need at that time. And so I think my best friend set up a meal train, which was super helpful. You're not really concerned about your eating at that time when you're going through all that, but it was always good to not have to worry if I did know I needed to eat, it was there. And then my kids,
Right.
because they always can eat at any time of the day. So having a meal train set up was great. And then they also set up a cleaning service that came twice a month and laundry service. It was a volunteer who I actually know her from high school, and she was a teacher at my school. And it's called Loads of Love. I don't know if like everyone does it or if it's just in our community, but I'd put my laundry on the porch. She'd come and pick it up and then drop it off the next day. And so it was just once a week. Once again, something easy. I still obviously with 3 kids had to do laundry throughout the week, but it got some of the major stuff done, and it was just really helpful to have that. So those are some tangible ways people helped.
I just wrote down every single thing. Literally, I'm like, this is so good, because I think you're right. Sometimes when people go through things, you don't always know what to do. And I know for me, the amount of times that in wanting to help, it's not been so helpful, like well-meaning, not so helpful.
Yes.
So it's good to have just these like tangible, okay, you have a friend going through something. Maybe it's not the death of someone. Maybe it's just a really difficult time. These are really, really easy ways to just step in and be like, hey, I'm going to come do this. So I wonder for you, when you think about this last year or so, what has it looked like because you mentioned you've gone back to work, you have 3 kids now, a little, and then your teenager and your son. What does it look like for you to just walk with Jesus in this? Because I feel like with not just with loss, but I'm going to use obviously your story, big moments like this where there's sort of the event itself, and you sort of come out of it in shock. Like you said, you don't even know. And then as you transition out, there's kind of the, okay, what does life look like now on the other side? And so for you and your faith journey, what does that look like?
Man. So I think the first few months, it's just survival. I remember thinking many times, is it always going to feel like this? Is it always going to be so heavy? Is it always going to be that I can't even look? Like, I remember picking my child up from carpool a couple of times, and, he went to the school that I taught at. So I'd pull up and it would be a teacher, and they would just say, how are you? Simple, like, how are you? And it would make me cry. And so it's like, I just remember thinking, am I always going to feel like this? I had gotten a counselor. I had started meeting with somebody. A little, like once or twice before James was born, and he was born in March after Sam passed, and then a little bit after that. And that was a huge help as well. He is former pastor, biblical counseling, somebody who I could just talk to and be raw and real with. And it wasn't like he said anything that was revolutionary that I hadn't heard before. He just validated a lot of feelings that I was feeling. And that brought so much comfort to me, to know, okay, this is normal. What I'm feeling is normal. And he would guide me back to what God's word says. And I think that was huge, was, you can feed yourself a lot of lies and all this. But he would just guide me to what's true and what's not true, and help me set some boundaries and things like that. So I think it was pure survival at first. And then about 6 to 7 months, I felt like I could breathe again. And, but even all throughout that year, there were many tangible ways I could see God's goodness, and that forced me to lean on him even more. My mom and I joke because, the first few months after Sam passed, it was January, and then James was born in March, and he, being my first biological son, didn't have, baby things. So lots of people were giving baby things, and overwhelming blessed me. And I remember thinking, like, oh, I think I don't have a mattress crib yet. Like I remember thinking, I don't think I have that yet. And no joke, it showed up that day that a coworker of mine, and she had told me at the shower, hey, your package is going to be coming this week, you know, da da da. Didn't think twice about it, didn't know what it was. But I remember thinking, I don't have the mattress crib yet, or the whatever I needed. And it would show up. And that happened 3 or 4 times that I didn't even pray it. I realized, oh, I think I might need this. And then it came. And so I think it was, although it's very easy to go to, why did the Lord make this happen? Why did this have to happen to Sam? It's very easy to go to that. And I'm not saying I never did. There were definitely days where I was like, why did this have to happen? Why me? Why Sam? But then there were also days like that where I was like, even in this nastiness, God can still be there. And I think a lot of times too in trials, people lean to Job. I honestly, Joseph was the most encouraging through all of these, because I feel like Joseph's life kind of felt like how I felt, you know, right before Sam passed, and even the years leading up to him, from when he got cancer and his surgery to when he passed. It was hard. It was a lot of hard years. It was beautiful in the sense of being married to him, but the cancer itself takes away a lot from you. We didn't even think we would be able to have James, and, you know, and then the Lord blessed us with James. And so I think that Joseph has been encouraging, because Joseph went through a lot of hard years, but then if his brothers had not done to him what they did, he would never have been able to provide for them when the famine happened. And so just looking at that of, if this nastiness hadn't happened, then this goodness wouldn't have happened. And I think that's how I start to see moments like that, where if this nastiness hadn't happened, then this goodness wouldn't have happened. And so I think leaning to God's word, certain stories in the Bible like that were always very encouraging to me. And I think just surrounding myself with godly people who had walked this road with me. Immediately when Sam passed, there were 2 people that came to my mind that I was like, I need to talk to them. One, I remember when I was in 8th grade, is when her husband passed from cancer, and he was a pastor at our church. And she had been my Sunday school teacher later in life, and just had always been circling back into my life somehow. So when he passed, I just reached out to her and said, can we go get dinner? And then another one, she lives in South Carolina, I think it's South Carolina. So she's not nearby, but her husband passed from the exact same thing Sam did. He fought his cancer for 11 months, and she had a newborn at the time. So just some similar things. And I reached out to her as well. And just people like that understand what you've been through, and you can be raw and real with, I think are huge. And I think God created us for that sense of, I don't think God created us for that sense of community. And I think it's super important to have people like that who have walked that road with you, or have walked before you and are on the other side. Because I remember going to dinner with Debbie. She's one whose husband, when I was in 8th grade, passed away. And I just remember asking her, like, does it always feel this heavy? Does it always feel this hard? And, you know, she's, I don't know, 15, 20 years from it now. And she said there are still days, but God comforts you. And, you know, she just kind of brought me back to the Lord in that. So I think that's how you can survive those first few months, and then start to breathe and look back and see some different things. And honestly, just talking about Sam's story, it's one of my favorites to tell. He loved to tell it. And so I think that one way to honor him is to continue to tell people about his story. And I know he would have been super excited to know at the funeral, there were a couple of people who came up to me who were not walking with the Lord, that Sam had done kickboxing with, or different things like that. And he would have been super jealous that I got to have those conversations with them, after years of him trying to have those conversations, in a good way, jealous that, you know, his funeral is what kind of brought those up. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question all the way, but I kind of hinted at it, I think.
No, absolutely. You know, a couple of things I appreciate everything you said, but a couple of things I think bear repeating, just how important it is to intentionally surround yourself with people who are pointing you back to what is true. And you mentioned that with your therapist, with these women who you reached out to them. There's a
Yeah.
real intentionality, and I know they've walked through what I've walked through. They have walked faithfully through it. I need to sit down with these women and
Yes.
just what a powerful impact that's had in your life. And I'm not going to lie, I was cracking up when you were talking about how you would just think about, oh, I don't think I have like a mattress pad. And then it would
Mm-hmm.
show up. And I don't know why. What came to mind is when we joke about, how our phones listen to us. Like, you say something and then you like go in, you're like, why am I suddenly getting ads for all of this?
All these ads.
Yes. And I was like, God like one-ups it. You don't even have to say it out loud. He is like, oh, you thought of this thing? Bam, there it like shows up on your doorstep.
Yep.
How
That's exactly how it is, actually. That's so
I
true.
love that. So as we get ready to sort of wrap this up, I'm wondering, and I'm putting you on the spot. So if you can't think of something on the spot, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But I loved how you said that Joseph was kind of the character. First of all, I feel like you guys are my people. First of all, the hype song. I have hit I am not even kidding. I've hit every record in my lifting to that hype song. And up until this moment, I've been embarrassed to say it, but I feel like this is the moment of confession to just let the world know. I am not like advertising Eminem, but that song, for whatever reason.
Yes.
And then Joseph is my all-time, like I go back to his story again and again. And you said it, this idea of if the bad hadn't happened, then this good couldn't. So can you think of an example where that is what you've gotten to see? Like an example in your life right now that you're like, this wouldn't be if I had not had this really hard thing happen.
I think that, like it's hard to point to like one thing right now. I could see later on, maybe I think in my children's life later on to see who they become as adults. I might be able to see some of the goodness there too. But I mean, some of the things that come to mind first is who I am and how I love and how I view people and time has drastically changed. But I think that would have been the case even if Sam hadn't passed. I think just cancer does that to you in general. I think that James is also a good reminder of that. So James, we named him after the book of the Bible, James, because it talks about trials. And the verse that Sam loved to point to was, oh goodness, I'm going to butcher it now that I'm on the spot, being like, it's a good gift from above. That's why he wanted to name. There's a verse in James, and I'm embarrassed that I cannot quote it now because I heard Sam say it so many times, but we named him after that verse. And I think that James is just one of the ones that I point to automatically of a goodness coming from that, because it could be very easy to look at him and think of sadness and Sam not being here and Sam not getting to witness his birth or anything like that. But he is the happiest kid ever. And unless it's nap time, he's just happy. And so like, you can't look at him and be sad. And so I think that, him too, who he becomes as an adult, I think this is automatically starting to shape him, whether he won't realize it or not, until he's aware of everything that happened. But I think he automatically comes with a story. And so I think to see what he might do with that story and what my kids might do with their story, I can already see some goodness happening from that. Because there are a couple of people have come up to me to say, like, your kids, I would never be able to tell that all this happened to them because of who they are as people. And that's not a testament to me at all. That is a testament to the Lord and what he has done in their lives. And so I think I don't have an exact answer of all the goodness. but I see the Lord providing this past year in tangible ways as a single mom, things like that, that might not have happened had all this come into play. So I don't have like an exact answer for you, but
No, and what I'm hearing is that a lot of the goodness is, God in a deeper and greater way that you could not have known without walking
yes,
through the valley of the shadow of death. Like,
100%.
yeah, that depth is, and they say that, right? Like we can only experience the depth of joy and rejoicing and all of that to the depth that we have suffered. James 1:17, is that the verse?
But yes, quote it for me, please. Because I'm like, what is it?
Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows.
Yes, that was it. I was like, is it above? There's a gift. And I could not. It's life verse. It's okay. I just completely blanked on it.
No, I love it. And just your story, Brittany, I'm so grateful for your faithfulness, for your journey. I know you say, your kids and everything is not a testament to you, but I do think there is something beautiful in how God is using you in your children's life, in the people that surround you, in everyone who's going to listen to this episode, and what a gift that's going to be. So thank you. Thank you for, this isn't easy to do.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just grateful for your willingness to share your story and to go to hard places, to be vulnerable with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. And for all the single parents out there, that's not easy either. That can be a whole nother podcast episode, because that's a whole nother level of hard. But I think we all have hard things we go through, and the perspective is huge. It's never easy at the time, but I think that looking back on it, you can see God's goodness throughout. Sometimes it's right after, sometimes it's 10 years from now. But I think that we don't ever know the why this side of heaven, but we do see his goodness and taking care of us after that too.
Amen. Amen, sister. Brittany, as always, this was just a sweet time. This is a gift to me. If this never went to anyone else, I just want you to know your story is a gift.
Well,
thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime.